So I know it's been a while, and the only thing I have to show for it is a couple of books that I've been reading. So let's get reading. Hello, readers. So I haven't been doing a whole lot while I've been gone. All that I have for you today is some talk about one of the books that I've read in the last couple of months. I'm always on the lookout for a good book, for more reading. I'm always building my reading list. So if you have any book recommendations, fiction or nonfiction, leave them below. I'll give anything a try. If it sounds interesting, I don't care about genre. If you are a writer and want me to read your book, leave it below because I understand the hustle, and so I'd like to hear from you. So the first book that I want to introduce today is not for the easily offended or the easily sick. Probably more likely the easily sick than the easily offended. Here's the hint. It says, "The time has come, friendly reader, for you to prepare your heart and mind for the most impure tale ever written since the world has begun." That is a mighty claim. It's got a glorious butt on the cover. Can you guess what it is? This is the Marquis de Sade, 120 Days of Sodom. I wanted to read this book because I was interested in de Sade personally, and I'm probably going to pick up some more books on his personal life, and I know I'm going to pick up The Philosophy of the Boudoir because it's got more of his religious philosophies, political philosophies, and ideas like that, and then it uses that in his fiction more. But I'm interested in him as a person, and I don't know if I've said it before already, but I don't think anybody is more honest than when they are writing. And so I feel like I got a good idea about a fair idea about de Sade's personality from reading this book. You get good glimpses of his ideas, and based on what I've read from his life and some of the things that he said before, you could see his stance on humanity in here, which is very bleak. I don't want to say that it reminds me of Panzram, because Panzram still had hope for humanity to fix their problems. You know, that's why when he died, he left them with the message of, if you don't want people to turn out like me, then don't treat them like you treated me. That was his message to say, you can get better than this in society. But de Sade believes in no moral shackles, no religious shackles, nothing to stop you from getting what you want. I saw somebody describe him as a radical libertarian, which is just pushing ultimate liberty. Why stop me from wanting what I want? You get what you want, I get to get whatever I want without you stopping me. You get to get whatever you want without stopping me. And if it puts somebody else at a disadvantage, well, if they want to stop it, it's their job to stop it. So he's the ultimate libertarian, and I started to wonder if there was a connection between libertarian and libertine, but I think a libertine is closer to an evolutionary stage of a libertarian, where it's just absolutely no laws outside of yourself. It's ultimate self-pleasure. So if you don't know anything about this book, it is about a couple of old friends, rich guys, in their like 55 to 60, I think 60 area is the oldest, and they have committed all kinds of crimes, killed people, actually gotten off to killing people, had people falsely accused of crimes to have them executed outside their windows kind of stuff, and then jacked off while having them killed, and just a bunch of despicable people. And they decide that they want to have a good time together. So they plan these 120 days, 4 months, where they're just going to have fun. And they decide they're going to bring in some children because they enjoy children. They're going to bring in some dudes with giant schlongs because they enjoy the schlongs. And they're going to bring in some debaucheresses who can tell their stories of debauchery and work them up a little more. So, they also include their daughters in here. And they bang their daughters, they bang each other's daughters, they murder each other's daughters, they torture each other's daughters. It's a whole thing. So, during these days, they've got 4 of the women that they invite in are storytellers. And by storytellers, I mean they tell stories about their backgrounds. All 4 of them used to work in brothels as young girls, and so they all tell stories of the terrible things they did in brothels. And we're not talking about just like being hired to have sex or being hired to talk to people. They tell the worst stories of debauchery they have. They reference that. Sure, they've had more plain, ungarbagey people, but the only stories that the 4 friends are interested in are the most disgusting of the stories, because that's all that they care about. So the 4 storytellers tell their worst stories. So the first month of storytelling is simple passions. 150 simple passions. So she tells 150 different stories of different clients that are just simple passions. I'm gonna tell you right now, that's about 200 pages of caprophilia. Like the first couple of stories, no poop involved. And then it goes on for a very long time. About half the book is clients and poop. And you're like, please let it be over. It gets really repetitive, honestly. And you start going, okay, I can't be really surprised about this anymore. And then somehow they do still surprise you. There are a couple of days in there where she's talking about her caprophilia people. And you're like, okay, I've heard this before. Okay. We're talking about the poop, we're jacking off, we're taking a break, whatever. And then there are like 3 days where you're like, whatever, for 3 days worth of stories where you're like, whatever. And then she surprises you with something new, and it's like, great. Then part 2 is dual passions, which it's mostly sex with more than one person. It's all sex with more than one person. Usually it's groups. And by sex, I mean sometimes it's usually involuntary. Then the third part is criminal passions, which includes starting to kill people. Oh, I'm trying to think. It's killing people and still intercoursing people. And in some part of this, there is, I think it was in dual passions, where it was pretending to kill somebody, stabbing them. There was one that was burying the coffin and then jacking off on the coffin. There was another one where it was walking in on a body on a woman that looked like she was murdered with a knife sitting there and then jacking off on that. And then the final one, that's the notes. Final one is murderous passions. So this is just like straight up torture. And this section, I was not expecting it because I hadn't felt anything through the rest of the book. But there were actually parts in this final section that made me feel sick in my head. Like I'd get dizzy reading it and have to take a break. And we're talking... Some of it is really inventive, and putting mercury in orifices and lots of pregnant lady killing. They really dislike women in this. He does have very charming writing, but it is very sickening at times. So one thing, so this is a translation since it's originally in French, and it's also historical literature since it was written in the 1700s. So it's got a different writing style than what we find in contemporary writing today. The first about 75 to 80 pages of this is introduction to the main cast of characters. So it goes into their backgrounds, it goes into what made them evil, it goes into long paragraphs of physical description, which I'm going to read a little bit of sample of here in a second just because it's pretty funny. And then it gets into the action. At the end of the 70-ish pages of character introduction, he then just does a summarization of who the characters are, their ages, a brief description, blah, 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 so that if you get confused later on in the story when they're mentioned, you'll have somewhere to reference. And spoiler alert, you do get confused because he introduces eight. He introduces about 30 characters all at once, and then you just jump into the story. And I mean, in part, some of it doesn't matter because 8 of them are just kids, or little 8 of them. In part, it doesn't super matter because 8 of them are just little boys and 8 of them are little girls, and they're all pretty much interchangeable, which sucks if you consider the kind of book that it is. But it also enforces this idea of dehumanizing people. And so it really, doesn't matter. That's one of the interesting things about it. They all have names and they all have backgrounds, and it is briefly mentioned, like, this girl comes from this high-ranking person in society, this boy is this person's son, and here are their names and here are their ages, 12, 13, 15, whatever. But as you go through and they're just kind of placed in there and paired in their groups, they all lose their identity to whatever part they're playing in the story. And you just go, well, they're just one of the little boys or girls. Oh, they're just one of the old hags. Oh, they're just one of the guys with the big dicks, because that's in there as well. So they just lose their identity to the role that the four friends want them to play. What's more helpful is trying to remember who are the four friends, but at the same time, the same thing happens to all of them. For me, at least, they're all despicable people. They're all people that just are into torturing these kids, and they're all just the bad guys, technically. There is one. I always say there's one thing. What it does do, a lot of times when you're writing contemporary or you go to writing workshops or anything, at least in the US, it'll talk about not doing a heck a ton of exposition all the way at the beginning because it's not interesting. I know that one way that you can actually fight that is if the characters are super interesting, but it is rare that it actually means anything to the people that are reading. But because these characters are so dastardly, they are so good at being bad people, they are interesting. Okay, President. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of descriptions here, like 2 maybe, just so you can get an idea. All the people in this aren't gorgeous, except the children are all beautiful, because he wanted to pick the most beautiful children there are. And you can expect all of the old people to be ugly. So there are 4 ugly women, old women, 4 more ugly old women. The 4 dudes are not all ugly, actually. One of them, it says, is beautiful. Not this one. The president of Craval is not beautiful. I want the beautiful one first. The Duke. Is the Duke a beautiful one? Yes. Okay. And all of the big dick guys are... There is a more profane word used for those guys. It starts with an F, ends with a U-C-K-E-R. And that's what they're known as. But they're all beautiful. At least one of the old friends is attractive-ish, and all of the other old people are just dumpster fires. And then all the kids are beautiful. I think there's a symbolism there in disgusting old people wrecking beautiful children. Anyway, description number 1. This terrifying colossus did indeed resemble Hercules or a centaur. The Duke was 5 feet 11 inches tall, with such a strong and powerful limbs, such sturdy joints, such supple sinews. Add to this a masculine and proud face, very large black eyes, handsome brown eyebrows, an aquiline nose, beautiful teeth, an air of health and vigor, broad shoulders, a substantial yet trim frame, splendid thighs, superb buttocks, the finest legs in the world, an iron will, the strength of a horse hung like a mule, astonishingly hirsute, gifted with the ability to spill his sperm as often as he wished in a day, even at the age of 50, as he was then, an almost continually erect member, precisely 8 inches around and 12 inches long. And now you have an accurate portrait of the Duke de Bellangus, as if I had drawn it myself. I'm pretty sure the narrator of this book is de Sade's personality, to some extent. And then we're going to go to the President de Craval. Was the most senior member of the company, almost 60 years of age and singularly worn down by debauchery. He was barely more than a skeleton. He was tall, wizened, gaunt, with sunken and dimmed eyes, a livid and sickly mouth, a prominent chin, a long nose. His hirsute as a sitar, or sorry, his as hirsute as a satyr. I always say sitar. With a flat back and flabby buttocks that smacked as much as they seemed more like 2 dirty rags flopping over his thighs. The skin there is so withered by lashes of the whip, one could wind it around one's finger without his noticing. In the middle of all of this, One could see, without having to spread his cheeks apart, an immense orifice whose enormous diameter, smell, and color made it resemble a chamber pot rather than an arsehole. And, to crown it all, this swine of Sodom's little habit included always leaving this part in such a filthy state that one could see without fail a layer of muck 2 inches thick around it, beneath a belly as wrinkly as it was livid and flappy. One could discern amidst a forest of hair a tool which in its erect state might have been about 8 inches long and 7 around. But this state was now almost rare, and a frenzied series of acts was required to induce it. The other 2 friends are not hung. For, just in case you were wondering, they're not. Do you want to... I'll give you... We'll do one more, and it'll be one of the ladies. Madame Desgrange. I never learned how to say her name. I'm sorry, it's French. I butcher it. I know. It's fine. She was vice and lechery incarnated, tall, thin, 56 years of age, pale and emaciated, lifeless eyes, dead lips. She was the very image of crime at death's door. She had once had brown hair. It had even been claimed she used to have a beautiful body. But before long, she was a little more than a skeleton that could inspire nothing but disgust. Her withered, worn, scarred, and lacerated arse looked more like marbled paper-thin human skin, and the whole was so large and wrinkled that the large... and the whole was so large and wrinkly that the largest of tools could enter her dry without her feeling a thing. To crown these charms, this noble athlete of Cythera, wounded in several battles, had 1 breast missing and 3 fingers cut off. She limped and was also missing 6 teeth and 1 eye. We shall perhaps learn to the kind of attacks which had her so mistreated. What is quite certain is that nothing had led her to mend her ways, and if her body was the image of ugliness, her soul was the repository of all the most unspeakable vices and crimes. An arsonist, a parricide, a sodomite, a tribade, a murderer, a poisoner. She was guilty of incest, rape, theft, abortion, and sacrilege. One could say all truth that there was not a single crime in the world this hussy had not committed or had others commit. Anyway, if you can stomach it, I do think it's an interesting read, and if you are short on torture methods for your character, this is a good book because you can open it to a page and then point and then make that the torture if you really want to. Your main character may hate you, and if it's in one of the last 2, your main character could die. Will probably die. I think both of the last 2 segments, or both of the last 2 months, as it were, are Tales killing people. I enjoyed it, but not in a typical way of enjoying books. I thought it was a worthy read, and if you have an interest in this type of seeing that side of people, it's great to see the creativity, the dangerous creativity of the human mind. It's great. Not everybody dies in the end, so I'm not gonna spoil that for you. If you want to know who else survives, read it. De Sade is great with words. His narration is actually good to read when it's not completely disgusting, and he does have a humor. There's a part in there where we're like halfway through the book. It's been like 200 pages, maybe not the full 200 pages of caprophilia, but he's like, and I don't want to describe this thing to you because you're a sensible person with an innocent mind, and I wouldn't want to corrupt your innocent mind with these disgusting things. But he's already said all of these disgusting things, so what kind of innocent mind do I have still? It is a fascinating read, and I do recommend it if you are interested and can handle this type of subject matter, but it is definitely not for everybody. I'm glad I got to read the classic, and I look forward to reading more De Sade, especially more stuff that'll get into his life and personality a little more. It's only mildly funny that he died in an insane asylum while he was buggering one of the workers, like 10-year-old, one of the workers' really young child. I'm pretty sure he was just a 70-year-old man in a relationship with a child who then got beat up by the child's dad and died. That's how I imagine it happening. Anyway, that is my book recommendation of the week. and I'll hopefully be back with another video soon. Drop me your book suggestions down below, and next video I will have something that's not a book review, and I'll also let you know the other 3 books that I have finished in the last couple of months. See ya!